Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. As we edge closer to the release of the joint Thousand Suns and Grey Knights codexes, we are as usual getting a week of rules previews and updates from Warhammer community. And today they are showing off a few of the brand new psychic powers and abilities that each of these two forces has access to. 3 for the Grey Knights and 3 for the Thousand Suns. And in a very cool update, the Grey Knights are now, much like the Thousand Suns unique cults, getting their own brotherhoods, which each have their own little piece of lore and specific rules, which include a warlord trait, a stratagem, and a psychic power. And what is quite neat about these is that they are taken in addition to any powers that the units from your particular sub-faction know. So you won't have to stop and think about whether these new Brotherhood specific powers are worth it. They are in essence just a free additional power on top of any others that you take, which to be honest is pretty damn cool and gives them a lot of utility, as potentially any unit in your army can cast these powers no matter where they are on the board. So first off, let's take a look at some of these new psychic powers which you Grey Knight players can look forward to casting. First up, we have the Wardmaker's Brotherhood, and their psychic power is Projection of Purity, which is honestly a brilliant little buff, coming in for a warp charge of 6. You select an enemy unit within 12 inches, and it cannot get the benefit of aura abilities until your next psychic phase. So this is potentially huge for turning off any reroll auras or buffs to charges or any of the other really useful auras that a lot of armies really depend on in their games of 9th edition. And for a warp charge of 6, I think this is incredibly well priced and honestly will be absolutely crucial in shutting down powerful enemy Death Stars that your opponent may send your way. And I just imagine casting this on a unit of 10 Hellblasters under Azrael's 4+ invulnerable bubble. Sorry guys, no more 4-up invuln for you. And then just, completely shoot them off the table with only their 3-up save protecting them. I am honestly a huge fan of this power, and I think it alone may well make the Wardmakers one of the top picks for a Grey Knight's Brotherhood in a lot of games. Up next, the Swordbearers Brotherhood are very much focused on heavy armor and tanks and gunships, and so their power, Empiric Lodestone, affects their vehicle units. With a warp charge of 7, you can choose a friendly vehicle within 18 inches, and until your next psychic phase, it gains +1 to wound rolls against enemy units. So giving things like your Dreadnought or your Dreadknight heavy weapons a huge amount more punch as they shoot into your enemy. +1 to wound is much rarer than +1 to hit in 9th edition, so this really is a big multiplier in the potential damage output of your vehicle units. At a warp charge of 7, it is a slightly higher casting value, but it does have a very decent 18-inch range, and hopefully with Grey Knights being a very psychic heavy army, there may be some ways through stratagems or warlord traits or army abilities to help get that 7+ a little bit easier. The final power that they show off for the Grey Knights is for the 4th Brotherhood, known as the Prescient Brethren, and what their Fatal Precognition power is, in line with their keen interest in mental manipulation and using their enemy's fear against them, a fantastic little malediction that allows you to select an enemy unit within 12 inches and on a ridiculously easy warp charge of 5 until your next psychic phase. Whenever that unit moves, advances, falls back, or charges, you roll a d6, and on a 4 or a 5 they take d3 mortal wounds, and on a 6 they take a flat 3 mortal wounds. And now this is just unbelievably powerful in terms of controlling the flow of a game. You want to charge my squads? Well, you've got a 50-50 chance of taking d3 mortal wounds as you come in addition to the overwatch that you can do. Do you still want to risk that? Or if a unit isn't quite in charge range and they need to move to get into charge range, that's possibly 2 chances for them to take d3 or even a flat 3 mortal wounds. Or if your opponent has a squad that needs to move and advance to get onto an objective, that could well cost you 6 mortal wounds to do. It is an immensely powerful spell to dissuade your opponent from doing much in their movement and their charge phases. And this, as I said, really can allow you to control the flow of the battlefield and keep your enemy off key objectives or locked up in combats that they may not want to be in. And overall, for a warp charge of 5, this is a fantastically useful little power, and one which will really allow you to mess with your opponent and punish them no matter what they try to do in their turn. In addition to the Grey Knights, we see a few powers for the Thousand Suns and their specific cults, some of which we have seen before in their Psychic Awakening book, but there are a few nice new powers in here as well. The Cult of Time power, Time Flux, is hilariously fun. Being cast on a warp charge of 6, you select an infantry unit within 6 inches of the Psyker and just straight up return a model to the unit. So that 3 wound, 2 up save Terminator that your opponent just killed, well, now he's back. Or are you just losing that objective by having 1 less model than your opponent? Well, now you can even the odds and make sure that at the very least it is being contested rather than your opponent claiming it. So whilst this isn't the most overtly powerful power ever, I mean it does just bring back 1 model, but when you think about it, this can be absolutely crucial to controlling objectives or just adding a couple of extra hits in melee or a couple of extra shots into your opponent that really could swing the flow of the entire battle. The Cult of Knowledge have their Empiric Trespass power, which allows you to select an enemy unit within 24 inches, and on a warp charge of 6, all of your Cult of Knowledge units can reroll wound rolls of 1 against them until your next psychic phase. It is, if we're being honest, just a slightly worse Doom, but it is still an incredibly powerful army-wide buff that means you can select 1 big key target that absolutely needs to die and just focus all of your firepower onto it, making the most of the reroll 1 to wound to make sure that you bring it down as fast as you possibly can. So I would say again, whilst not the most overtly powerful power, it's not super amazing, but it is one that you will really love when you need to take down someone like Mortarion or the Silent King before they reach your lines. And then finally we have the Cult of Manipulation, and their power, Attempted Possession, is... honestly, it's kind of just one of those boring powers that all disciplines have. You choose an enemy within 18 inches, and on a warp charge of 5+, it takes a mortal wound, and then you subtract 2 from psychic tests for it until your next psychic phase. Against some armies, like Eldar or Tyranids or Grey Knights, this will be fantastic. Dropping a flat -2 onto their rolls will make the majority of powers much harder to cast, but against some armies like Custodes, it is going to pretty much never get cast. And I think the main problem I have with this one is that all of the other powers have at least some use pretty much all the time, whereas this one feels very niche. It is certainly powerful in the right matchup, and with a warp charge of 5, it is very castable when you need it. I just don't think it's going to be as impactful generally as some of your other powers are. But there we go, a short little look at some of the brand new powers coming for both the Grey Knights and the Thousand Suns. I will be honest, I'm really excited about the new Brotherhoods and seeing what other kinds of psychic trickery each of these 2 factions will be able to bring to the battlefields of 9th edition. But what do you think? And which of the Brotherhoods that we've seen today do you think will be the best on the tabletop? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I will catch you later, guys.